I heard a story a few years back about a person reading on an airplane. As the plane began its final descent, the flight attendant got on the intercom and reminded the passengers to put away their tray tables, pull their seats forward, and gather all the trash for disposal. She also reminded people to please turn off their books. And while I know electronic devices can now be used throughout one's flight, what a world we live in. A request that, if heard even just 15 years ago, people would have been baffled by. But it makes perfect sense today. iPads and Kindles were put away only to be picked up again after touchdown. Please turn off your book. Jews are called the people of the book. Our history demonstrates this. Whether the book in question is a scroll, a legal code, a collection of poetry, a personal diary, a bound volume, a paperback novel, or a Kindle. Books have been at the center of our evolution as a people, from the opening words of Genesis to the best Israeli novels of the 21st century. As Rabbi Larry Hoffman notes in the introduction to his book, 100 Great Jewish Books, whatever Judaism might be, it has consistently demonstrated a particular fondness for books. Since books are nothing if not records of things said, Judaism may be best defined as an ongoing conversation. Hoffman and others ask us to find our place in the conversation. Think about our people and books for a moment. In a few weeks, we will gather to read the story of Esther, the story of the survival of the Jews of Shushan, probably first written down over 2,400 years ago. 1 month after Purim, we'll gather at our Seder tables and tell the story of freedom from the Haggadah. And while today there are many different types of Haggadot, the tradition of reading the Haggadah, the book that guides the Seder, dates back to the Middle Ages. On Simchat Torah in the fall, we literally dance with our Torah scrolls. Or take a trip to Israel and visit the world-renowned Israel Museum, home to Chagall's and Picasso's, but also home to the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Dead Sea Scrolls are ancient manuscripts discovered at the dawn of the modern state of Israel in caves near Qumran, an ancient city on the Dead Sea. They are over 2,000 years old and include the oldest known written fragments of the Hebrew Bible. The Dead Sea Scrolls are not just fascinating historical documents, but part of a Jewish pilgrimage. According to the Israel Museum webpage, the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls represents a turning point in the study of the history of the Jewish people. In ancient times, turning point in the study of the history of the Jewish people in ancient times, for never before has a literary treasure of such magnitude come to light. Of course, it's not just these sacred books that have cemented our connection as a people. It's Rashi and Maimonides, the Aleppo Codex or the Cairo Geniza, the magical Golem and the Klutzes of Chelm, Emma Goldman and Shalom Aleichem, Roth and Bellow and Ozick, Agnon and Anne Frank, Yehuda Amichai and Hannah Senish, Sidurs and Ketubas and Machzors. Rabbi David Ibn Zimra of the 16th century teaches that if one buys a new book, he should recite the benediction of the Shehechianu. At Beth Am, we study Talmud and Torah weekly. Beth Am men and Beth Am women have book groups. Our Sunday schoolers love visiting our library, and many of them subscribe to PJ Library, an amazing program which sends free, award-winning books that celebrate Jewish values and culture to families with children from birth through 12 years old. Last year, our member, Karen Huberman, brought the amazing documentary to Beth Am about the Ringelblum Archive. I had never heard of it before. A collection of documents and solicited written testimonies and reports about life in the Warsaw Ghetto. As the Nazis liquidated the ghetto, the archives were hidden to be found after the war. There is still a missing cache of documents rumored to be buried beneath the Chinese embassy in Warsaw. I love the words of the medieval Spanish poet Yehuda Halevi. My pen is my harp and lyre. My library is my garden and orchard. The phrase people of the book is actually rooted in the Quran, the holiest book of Islam. The original phrase likely refers to non-Muslim religious groups whom the Prophet Muhammad thought were following a sacred literature, primarily Christians and Jews. As our religion has grown and evolved, it is often seen as a positive phrase that promotes the desire for Jewish communities to be engaged with intellectual pursuits. Some even suggest that our relationship with our sacred literature has kept us connected as a people. Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis, in 1915, writes an essay called The Educated Jew. The conditions under which the Jews were compelled to live during the last 2,000 years promoted study in a people among whom there was already considerable intellectual attainment. Throughout the centuries of persecution, practically the only life open to the Jew which could give satisfaction was the intellectual and spiritual life. Other fields of activity and of distinction which divert men from intellectual pursuits were closed to Jews. Thus, they were protected by their privations from the temptations of material things and worldly ambitions. Driven by circumstance, Brandeis continues, to intellectual pursuits, their mental capacity gradually developed. And as men delight in that which they do well, there was an ever-widening appreciation of all things intellectual. And since we're the people of the book, we should be extra concerned about threats on books. Increasingly around the country at state and local levels, there are those encouraging and advocating for school boards and libraries to ban or remove books. The American Library Association recently said that it received an unprecedented 330 reports of book challenges, each of which can include multiple books last fall. This year alone, a Texas state representative put more than 800 books on a watch list, many of them dealing with race and LGBTQ issues. An Oklahoma state senator filed a bill to ban books that address sexual perversion, among other things, from school libraries. Some of the books under fire include To Kill a Mockingbird, The Bluest Eye, Beloved, Of Mice and Men. And as many of you know, earlier this month, Tennessee's McMinn County School Board voted 10-0 to ban Art Spiegelman's Mouse, the award-winning graphic novel about the Holocaust, from use in middle school classes. In Mouse, Spiegelman follows his Jewish parents in 1940s Poland from their early experiences of anti-Semitism to their internment in Auschwitz. It shares a deeply personal experience of victims and survivors of the Holocaust. Mouse remains the only graphic novel ever to win the Pulitzer Prize. It also has been an entry point into Holocaust education for a generation of people of all backgrounds, inspiring critical thinking about our role in the world. The author, Azar Nafisi, who wrote the best-selling and won banned in her own country, the famous book Reading Lolita in Tehran, wrote in last week's Washington Post, "It is alarming to think that American communities in 2022 are actively seeking to deprive people of the reading experiences for which my students in Iran paid such a heavy price. For I can tell you, book bans are canaries in coal mines, indicators of the direction in which a society is moving. In recent years, we have seen how truth is replaced by lies and how dangerous a cultivated ignorance can be, especially when it is embraced by political leaders and loud media commentators, those with the largest bullhorns. Book banning is a form of silencing, and it is the next step along a continuum, one that I worry, even in the United States, presages a future slide towards totalitarianism. It is essential that communities unite to resist this trend. And what I keep coming back to is, we cannot be indifferent. We must read and share and press into the hands of students any books we believe it is in the young people's right to encounter. As Ray Bradbury once said, you don't have to burn books to destroy a culture. Just get people to stop reading them. Certainly, educators and parents and librarians should make wise choices about the appropriate age to read certain books. And I do believe that there's a place for parental involvement in school literary choices. But on the whole, I trust librarians and teachers to make wise decisions on what to read for our children. I love what Rabbi Barbara Simons wrote. I must point out that those who are banning books for sexual content would have to ban a good portion of the Torah, plus her commentary and midrashim, and we don't even want to talk about the Talmud. While no 13-year-old wants to ascend the bima and chant about bodily emissions or childbirth or forbidden sexual unions, one of the messages is that the Torah, and therefore Judaism, speaks to every aspect of life if we but let it. It is upon us to dig deeper through a combination of interactive study, commentary, and life experiences. Books have always been part of who we are. With a good book, you are never alone. See this sermon as one, a call to action and attention. We must rise up and fight book banning and book removal in all forms. But just as important in my mind, too, an invitation to engage with our sacred texts. Yes, today they have expanded to platforms our grandparents and great-grandparents could have never imagined. But we remain the people of the book. So pick one up. Shabbat Shalom.